exactly do? I mean, I had like 2 suggestions. One was to make something that interacts with, I don't know, something outside Minecraft, like a pie or something, which I think is kind of unrealistic for this setting. And the other suggestion was to teach people how to lure. I'm not sure if that's if that makes sense.
I
I
like
don't know
the
how
second
many
one.
of you already know lure, if you're interested in that. So
I mean, how long would the second one take, though?
how much will what take?
How long would the second idea take to teach people Lua?
I
Or
don't know.
base?
Depends on the people.
Fair enough.
I mean, the question is basically, what would you be interested in hearing about? So, I mean, I can talk about basics of Lua and how to use it in OpenComputers. I can talk about stuff that probably wasn't in OpenComputers the last. I'm not talking very quietly. In the last talk, so in the last BTM, or what will be new in the 1.6 version, which is what's on the server and which will come out sometime soonish, whenever I get the time to port over to 1.8, whatever is currently in 1.6. So if there's any preference in what to talk about. Yes, my 1.8 ports.
Penalty.
Because they can, probably. So yeah, the only reason I'm even asking is because I'm not sure if I wouldn't bore people to death talking about basics of Lua if they already know it. And yeah, the TIS-3D stuff was indeed an idea to talk about in the second half or so, if we run out of ideas otherwise. I'll gladly talk about that. I mean, I can talk about it right now, but yeah, if that's what you'd rather hear. I mean, it's called an OpenComputers panel, but we can just be creative here. How to take over the world with drones. Build them, teach them how to do stuff, and be happy. So yeah, okay, so if I don't hear anyone saying something about not wanting to hear about, okay, I can do TIS-3D right now, that's a thing, of course. I mean, can you just say in chat if you would like to hear about TIS-3D instead? Okay then. So, TIS-3D. How many of you have not heard of the mod at all yet? Okay, so there are a few. That's good. So I can start at the beginning. So, have you heard of the game TIS-100? Okay. So TIS-100 is it's a puzzle game essentially, and what you do is you have a set of nodes, and you can program some of those with a basic ASM, so assembler dialect, let's call it, and then you have to solve certain puzzles by moving data from an input port to an output port in a certain way, however the puzzle defines it for you. So TIS-3D takes the idea of these programmable nodes, and what it doesn't do is it doesn't give you puzzles. What it does give you is basically the whole system, the single parts, and then you can build machines to somehow. Thank you for the link. Yes, exactly, that's the game. And then you can build computers that are basically very low tech and use those to automate other stuff or just have fun in general. So it's basically tech-wise somewhere between redstone circuitry, so even advanced redstone circuitry with gates and stuff, but below OpenComputers or ComputerCraft and other stuff like that. So what the mod adds are, let me grab some stuff. It adds 2 blocks, and that's all the blocks it adds. So the first block is the controller block. That's this one. It's a bit blue, and that's the casing block. So to build a computer, yes, I will. No worries. Computer consists of a controller block, which basically drives the computer. It's not really the CPU, it's more like the clock, the time giver for the thing. And the casing is used to actually place modules in. So each casing, as you can see, it has on the sides it has an indentation, and you can place a module on each side of these casings. So for example, the more important one, is the execution module. So this is this one. And as you can see now, it's black unless you're standing very closely in front of it. And let's grab that. Whoops. And that. But as soon as I put some redstone power to the controller, you can now see that it lights up. So all the modules in the computer, yeah, well, excuse me. It's hard to press one button down and do stuff in the meantime, because I haven't figured out how to toggle shout. Each module is only active as long as the controller is active. And as long as the controller is active, the modules basically do their thing. And the execution module is the programmable part of the computer. So what you can do to program it is you can grab a code bible, which is basically just a book that you can use once on a module in a casing, and then you get it. And that's kind of like a book and quill, so you can edit it, you can open it, you can write code in it. And once you've written the code, you can click it again on the execution module, and then it'll do stuff. No, it does not have a scroll bar, because that is an unsupported feature to have more than 20 lines in the thing. Because it makes stuff too easy. Be happy that it's there anyway. So for example, let's say, so now it does a few things, because I just wrote for a few lines of code for it to execute. So what this now does, it moves a value into the accumulator register, and then it subtracts one until it's empty, and then it starts again. Yeah, I know, you can't, well, that's a problem. If you were closer, you'd see that there's stuff on this now. If you're far away, you only see that it's green. So if you're interested, you can get closer, and then you can see that there is text on it, which indicates the current state of the execution module. Exactly. So I think it's even less, I don't know. It's basically to avoid rendering too much. That's too tiny to decipher anyway. So that's all nice and good, but what can you actually do with this code to interact with the world? So as in TIS-100, each of these modules can interact with the four sides of the face it's on by writing and reading single values to it. So for example, this execution module could now say, okay, I want to write a value to the right of me, or I want to read a value from above me. So what I could do now is grab more stuff. So this is a keypad module, which allows you to insert numbers, and this is a redstone module, which, as the name suggests, inputs and outputs redstone values. So if I change the code now, if it works. Why is it blank now? Oh well, I guess that's a bug. Anyway, what it now does, it moves values from the right to below it. So if I enter a number on the right here, then it will adjust the redstone output of the redstone module accordingly. So that's how those basically operate with stuff. So you can also do, what you can also do is then you can read a value from, I don't, but I am shouting, I don't know. Check ignore positional audio. What? How do I do that? How do I ignore positional audio? Where do I disable that? In the shortcut settings. Okay. I found it. Is this better? Yay! Tell me that sooner. Okay. I was shouting. Yeah, well, I didn't know about the setting. Okay. So where was I? Right. So you can combine these casings in any kind of shape you kind of want, and you can also, read and write settings around the corners. So I could just as well put the keypad here and enter numbers over here, and that's still working. And it also works across the corners for the casings, of course. So it could also write to here or so. So there's a couple of modules for now. There's, let me see. There's the execution module, of course, the redstone module. There is the redstone module. There's also a module for emitting audio. So this basically is a note block in module form. So I can put this, let's say here, and let's see what happens. Oh, yeah, that's the values are too low now. What I can do, theoretically, is grab another module. So this is the random number generator module. And this now spams numbers into the audio module and randomly emits sounds, which totally isn't annoying or anything, but you get the idea. And one of the more complex modules that's also there is the display module. So this allows drawing arbitrary rectangles by sending the numbers in the right order into the display module. I sometimes lose ignore. Okay, maybe I just sometimes slip from the key. And another one exactly is the infrared module. So let's grab one of those. So this one, this one is used to transmit data over, I don't know, I think it's 3 or so chunks in a straight line. So if another infrared module is in a straight line in front of this one, it can receive data sent from this one and the other way around. And if entities are in its way or blocks, then the transmission obviously won't go through because it's infrared, so it's line of sight. And if I spam a few values out, you see redstone particles along the path where it sends the data. In general, on the corners, you also see these redstone particles. Those just indicate that there's some data transmission going on over there. And let's see, glass works fine. So anything that's not opaque will let the redstone go through. Oops. What else do we have? Then there's also another module from TIS-100. That's the stack module, which allows you to store 60 numbers in a, LIFO order. So the last one you push in, that's the first one you get out again. And there's also a RAM module, which allows you to store 256 values. However, you can only store bytes in there, whereas everything else in the whole system operates on shorts. So you have minus 32,000 to 32,000 in general, but the stack module only stores bytes and can only be addressed in the byte range. So it has 256 entries. Yeah. And you can, so basically the RAM modules works by you write the first value, which is the address, and then you either read from it, which gives you the value in that address, or you write to it, which then sets the value on that address. And what else do we have? That's, oh, right, and then there's the bundled redstone module for operating with bundled redstone mods. So for example, Red Logic, Project Red, Blue Power is also supported, if I remember correctly, and on 1.8, Charset indeed. The only one on 1.8, actually. And that's, let me check. There's one more special port, but I won't go into that one. And then there's yes, there is, okay, so I will go into that module. There's the serial port module. This is intended for mod integration specifically, but only where it's actually really sort of necessary. So the main philosophy is if you can do it with redstone, then do it with redstone. But if there's anything in particular very special that you can't transfer via redstone because it's lossy or anything, then you can use that module. And for example, with OpenComputers, you can plug the serial port module in front of an adapter, and then you can use OpenComputers to read and write single values from or to the TIS-3D computer. And there's also integration for the Minecraft furnace just for testing, because that was my main test case. So can you read the remaining fuel and the progress of the current smelting operation from that? As for further modules, there's also the first add-on modules in Computronics. So there is, let's grab one. Sorry, I had to press E to open my inventory. I don't know, I didn't see anything. Okay, wait, what? No, that didn't work. One second. Wait, what the heck is... Yeah, I see that. But for Whisper Shout, I can only set the data for the current channel, but I can figure out a way to toggle it actually. So, yeah. Well, that's what I have. But if I set it to like, oh God, now I break everything. I forget. Whatever. Okay. So add-on modules. There's the colorful module from Computronics. Whoops. Let me get there. So that looks like this by default. And if I feed in random values now, you can see it gets random color values. So if you come by the OpenComputers booth later on, there's a whole dance floor using those. I don't know if it's on currently, but yeah. So that's a neat little thing if you want random colors somewhere. And the values you feed in are basically an RGB code encoded in a short. So I don't know which bytes are which, but everything is documented in the in-game documentation. So if you use a book on the controller, a vanilla book, then you get the in-game manual, and all functionality is documented in there, including the ASM opcodes for the execution module and so on and so forth. There you go. So, and there's also a few example builds for TIS-3D computers in the big house. That's the OpenComputers, etc. booth. So, for example, there's one that uses the display module to display the text TIS-3D, and there's one that does it's compatible with TIS-100. How would it do that? And there's one that uses basically a 7, what do you call it? 7-part encoding to do a number display. I was called 7-segment. Yes, thank you. Exactly. And there's one that basically just uses infrared to bounce around numbers and then trigger an audio module. So that's that. I would. What? C-sized. 1, 2. What's the size of those? How do you define the size? How do you? I don't know. But let's see. Probably OC size TIS. Because TIS is lower tech, so it can't do as much. But yeah. So, and with the ASM language, you can basically program these whichever way you want. There's a few limitations, basically taken from the TIS 100 game, because that makes it a lot more interesting. The first is that each execution module only has one actual freely usable register, and that's at the same time the accumulator. And it has one backup storage, so it's called BAK, B-A-K. And you can save values into that, but you get them out, you have to swap them with the accumulator. And so that means if you want to do like more complex operations, you usually need more than one module, and that's when the stack module and the RAM module become really useful. So yeah, it's still a pretty young mod, so there were a couple of things already that I had to fix in the preparations because networking was terrible and stuff like that, but it is working, the basics are working pretty well, and we'll have to see. So for one computer you can use 8 casings, and you can fit in as many modules as you can in those casings. The same line, so there's a few lines more. You can have 20 lines per execution module here. Basically that's mainly because the display shows 10 lines and I wanted to have it in even 2 pages to display. So whenever the pointer, basically the program counter, goes to the next page on the execution module, then it will flip and show that page, and the same way the other way around. Text. Portable, I don't think so. How much RAM? Let me think. You can have 33 modules per computer, so you can have 32 times 256 bytes of RAM on one computer, and then you can of course combine them using infrared, so as much as your server can handle probably. You cannot make a memory leak, really. Sorry. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Never, no terrible networking at all. All right. So yeah, and if you're interested, so TIS is available on 1.7 and 1.8. So if you like to start messing around with 1.8 or 1.8.9, then you can mess around with TIS-3D still. How much can we make it interact? So as I mentioned, basically you can push around numbers. So that's still working. You can put the serial port module in front of the adapter module, and then you can just write and read to the TIS computer however you like. There's a small buffer in the component that is offered by the OpenComputers side. So I think it's 16 values or so. So you can write a few values in one tick. And if the TIS-3D computer is overclocked, then you can probably read them before you can write more with OC. I'm not sure. Ah, yeah, right. That's another thing. The controller for the TIS-3D computer, as you see, it runs basically on Redstone. So if I turn that off, it powers off. And a slight detail here is if you power it with less than 15, then it runs slower. Down to 1, it pauses, and when it's paused, you can right-click the controller to advance it by 1 step. And you can also use a higher power value, so if you use levers on more than one side, then it runs faster. And no, they don't take energy in the sense of RF or anything like that. Yeah, red logic wires are supported, the bundled one as well. There's a bundled Redstone module that, let me grab it. Where is it? Here it is. So it looks pretty similar to the redstone. Oh god, that's a bad idea. Let's put it there. Similar to the redstone one, but the change is that you have to set the channel on which you want to read, I believe it is. And when you pull values, you read values from that channel. And when writing, the channel is encoded in the high byte of the short. What was I saying? Microcrafting, no microcrafting, indeed. So this is low tech in all senses. So the casing is, I don't know, just look it up. I think we have NEI, right? So it's all very basic recipes. I mean, it's not super cheap, so it's actually still more expensive than ComputerCraft, but comparatively, it's very cheap and it's very easy to craft. So all the modules use just vanilla items and stuff like that. The keypad uses so all the modules use pretty much the same recipe. So it's 4 glass pines, 2 iron, redstone, and you get 2 modules for that, and then 1 special ingredient. And for the keypad, it's 1 button. So I think you'll survive that. A video and TIS sometime. Sorry, what? So the number pad uses 1 button, yeah. No buttons and buttons and buttons, no. Video, I don't know, sometime-ish. I have a first video up, but it's kind of old now, so there's a bunch of more stuff, so I need to make a new one. But we'll see when I have the time for that. Touch screen for TIS. What do you mean? Oh right, the Prism is a bit more expensive, true, but you should survive that. It is powered by redstone, yes, you could say that. So it sort of uses power, but not a generated power. Bundled cabling is not working for overclocking, no. You have to use regular redstone for that. Right, you can control tapes. So Computronics has also a module for controlling tape drives using these computers. So that's also a possibility. You can... I think that's still just counted as 1 times 15 if it comes from one side. So, yeah. Drones can rightly guess what? So basically, okay, so when you read out, you get in the high byte the X and in the Y byte the low. Yeah, that could work. That could work. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'll think about that. Right. So okay. So yes, one more thing I'd like to note is that there's pretty much no GUI in the mod at all. So there's the manual and the book for writing the code, but that's it. So I think that's close enough to the challenge of a computer mod without GUIs as I can get. Everything else is basically in-world. So the keypad, everything is just on the modules itself. There's even the book and quill, yes. You can use the book and quill to program these as well, but it's kind of painful because you can't edit anywhere. So the code Bible is a lot more convenient because it also gives you syntax error indications and stuff like that. When I don't know, make an add-on mod maybe. Yeah. What else? TIS architecture for OC, that should be sort of possible, but it's kind of hard to interact with the components then, so just stick with TIS-3D. Okay. Alright. So, how are we on the video anyway? How's the video stuff coming along? AC?
Video stuff. I'm not a drone right now, I'm helping out a user. And as for the
okay.
video, with the lag spikes, I think we can safely say forget about it for now.
Ah, too bad.
I'm going to try and figure something out. Maybe when during the day 2 restart, I'm going to patch up Computronics a bit more. But before that, probably not today.
Alright.
Maybe for the ending keynote.
That'd be nice. So you have to watch it in single play, basically. But you can, then, whenever it's up. Okay, so I think that's the basics. So, yeah, you can, of course, use the Redstone modules to power other TIS computers. So there's that option. You can communicate between TIS computers using the infrared modules. And as mentioned, you can only have up to 8 casings per computer. If you have more, it powers down. And you can also only have 1 controller per computer. So if you have more, it powers down. So yeah, that's TIS-3D. And if you have any questions anymore, let me know. We're kind of at the time limit for the whole thing anyway. So
Not
yeah,
really,
that's
actually, because
Not really.
I left you a buffer. I removed the buffer times from the testing, so, you know.
Okay, so we can talk about more open computer stuff if you like. Or we can talk more about TIS. Whatever you'd like.
I have to say, I'm still impressed by how quickly the entire map loads now that only one screen sends the data and not all of them. It has been a massive improvement on the chunk load times.
Selani, I don't know. Get a computer, install OPPM?
You didn't get it, Sangar.
What?
Selani.
No, I did get it. That's why I mean you install OPPM and then you download it.
Yeah. Oh, Sangar, good question. OPPM versus MPT.
Yeah, sure. If you use Plan9K, use MPT. If you use OpenOS, use probably OPPM, I guess.
Yeah, well, if you use Plan9K, you have no choice.
There are mod packs. I actually don't know off the top of my head which ones, but there are.
The FTP ones, but they use it in a terrible way and they should be ashamed.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. The FTP ones use the Lua.j implementation of Lua. Yes, they disabled the native libraries, so that means that the computers don't persist. And you probably also are stuck with all the Lua.j bugs, so yeah.
Which version of Lua.j are you using?
I don't know. The one from back when.
If you upgrade to the latest version, I think they have most of Lua 5.3 working and most of the bugs fixed.
Huh, I might look into that then.
Yes. Actually, no, you should just remove Lua.j. Remove Lua.j after the 1.8 pack comes out.
No.
Alright.
Lua in Minecraft. How do I... Okay, so OpenComputers has a pretty low-level API that allows defining architectures for computers. So insert errors here. Yes, I'll come to that. So Lua is not the only language the computers can theoretically be programmed in. However, except for the Lua ones, there's pretty much only work-in-progress architectures right now. So the built-in ones are Lua and different variants. So there's the normal Lua, so 5.2, there's 5.3, and then there's Lua.j, which is the older version and is 5.2, I think. And for the native ones, that uses basically a platform-specific library, which uses the original Lua version as given out by the people that develop Lua, with a addition, and that's a library I wrote, which basically takes care of persisting a Lua state, including the state of coroutines, which is what you use to pause a program in Lua, basically. So let's see. Let's clean this up here. Whoops. So in Lua, you have your typical constructs for languages like, your functions and your for loops and all that good stuff. Whoops, yes. But what you also have is coroutines. So, I don't know, they're called differently in different contexts sometimes, but what those essentially are a definition of your call stack, and what you can do is you can, at any point in these coroutines, you can say, I want to stop here, returns some value, and when the coroutine is resumed, it continues at exactly that point. So let's see. Let's lower this a bit more. So this should be better. Okay, so this will be hard now to shout and to type. Okay, so what this basically did is I created a coroutine. That's the one I just saved in the CO variable, and that coroutine wraps a function. So every coroutine wraps some function because that's basically that defines the entry point of the coroutine. And that function right here, it yields once and it yields the value 10. So that basically means when I execute this coroutine, at that point it returns with the value 10, and then I can call it again, and then it will just end. So what I can do now is execute it. Like this, and it returns true, which means it didn't error, and it returns the value that the yield returned, basically. And if I do this again, it still returns true, but no additional value because I didn't return anything anymore and the program terminated. And if I do it again, it now gives me an error because the coroutine is dead. So it returned its final return, essentially, and it can't be resumed anymore. So to make this a little more interesting, what you can then do, you can, you can communicate in both directions. So to pass values out of a coroutine, that's what you use the yield for, but you can also pass values back in. So So now I print out the return value of the yield inside the coroutine. So whenever I call the coroutine again after it yielded, it will then take another value as a parameter for the resume method, and that value will be returned by the yield function inside the coroutine. I know this is confusing, but that's how it works. Where were we? So these two lines are now the print inside. Oh, no, scroll back. Yes, these two lines at the bottom here, this is now the print inside the coroutine that printed out, sorry, the first line, the 10, that's the print inside the coroutine, and the true is then again the return value of the coroutine itself. So yeah, so essentially that's how the coroutines work. It allows you to stop your program at any point you like, and this basically applies for the whole computer. So at some point, every computer must yield. If it doesn't, it gets shut down forcibly because it blocks a worker thread, and that's bad. And whenever it yield returns, that means the whole Lua state is now in a paused state, essentially. And whenever it's in a paused state, I can go in and say, okay, for every value that's now on the top level stack of Lua, I can persist that value. And for each coroutine, I can get the call stack for the coroutine, and I can persist that too. And that way I can persist the whole Lua state for the main coroutine that runs the OpenComputers computer in the game. And I can write that to disk, and then I can load it back later, and that's how the persistence in OpenComputers works, essentially. And that's the native library that's in the jar, and you don't have to download anything in addition, but that's everything in there for Windows, for FreeBSD, for Linux, for Mac, and I think that covers about it. ask yourself. Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's the basic functionality for the whole persistent stuff in OpenComputers. If the whole coroutine stuff was too confusing for you, don't worry. You usually don't need to use it manually if you just want to write small programs. But that's essentially the core mechanism in Lua to parallelize things. In OpenOS, the default operating system, this is handled. This is basically wrapped for you, so you can use event listeners to register just a callback, and that's called whenever something interesting happens. And that's how you can essentially also set up background worker programs, so to call them. There's also Plan 9K, which we mentioned earlier. That's the operating system Magic is working on, and that's a lot truer to basically the whole Linux or POSIX philosophy, and everything actually behaves like a separate thread or process in there, and he has a process tree and everything and all. It's pretty damn cool. So if you are interested in that and want to dive in a bit deeper, I'd certainly recommend looking into that. It's also on a loot disk in OpenComputers. Things like making way to automate. So OpenComputers can interact with AE in very elaborate ways. So what you can do is you can place an adapter next to a interface from ME, and then you can access the ME system, like querying what items are in the system. You can query which recipes are available, so what crafting operations you can trigger, and then you can also trigger those crafting operations. So that stuff. That was that stuff. Theoretically, yes. I mean, you can have a robot that drops it into water and then picks it up again. I'm not sure if one of the blocks that wasn't in during the last BTM is the transposer block, which can be used to move items from between inventories and fluids. I'm not sure if that can drop items into the world and pick them back up. It might. I'm actually not sure anymore. If it can, then you can use that. Otherwise, you'll have to use a robot or a drone. Multi-language OpenOS. I don't have any concrete plans to make the OS itself localizable, but as you probably know, the whole system uses the Unifont to render stuff, so you can use any kind of foreign characters you'd like to use in there. And also, one of the recent pull requests added, I think so at least, supposedly added proper support for white characters in the input. So let's see. Do I have? No, I don't have any keyboard layout to enter anything fancy right now, but or maybe I can copy something. Let's see. Let's see. There we go. So stuff like this works. That's Japanese, by the way. So if you'd like, you can localize it yourself. It says Japanese. No, in Japanese, actually. Doom to Lua. I think you'd have to ask GreaseMonkey for that. Yes, UTF-8 support is exactly that. So you can. So most of the UTF-8 characters are supported. Basically, pretty much everything that's in Unifont. Where did I leave off? Cameras that output to probably not, because rendering is done on the client, and the server doesn't know anything about that, and the displays are server-side. So the best thing you can get is probably something like the Computronics cameras, which basically do ray tracing on the server, and then you can get at least the blocks that are somewhere and render basic images from that. But actually detailed images like you see on the client side, you probably won't get that on the server screens ever, because you'd have to transfer it from some client who renders it to the server or something like that, and that's very messy to say the least. Code coloring like in editor? In the coloring in the in-game editor. I don't know, possibly. I actually never tried to add that because yes, Ahni. Yes, I'm German, by the way. Because of performance worries, so to say. So I never even bothered to look into that. Brachars, whatever, possibly. Yeah, Vim is like the longest standing request, but no one ever did it. GPU question. What? Where? Where's the question? The question never comes. Oh, there it comes. You currently can't. So it's essentially pretty much every question you could possibly ask about the GPU implementation has been asked and has been discussed. So there's one issue on GitHub which contains most of the info and references the rest. And basically it boils down to nobody having the time or the motivation to look into it over a longer period of time and actually implementing it. And as we've now seen, you can do pretty advanced stuff with things as they are anyway. So who knows? Maybe the motivation is even lower now. Don't do colors. What? Yeah, that's the one. Exactly. Thank you. So there is a IDE, what's it called? I forgot it. There's some IDE for Lua, and I'm pretty sure you can define custom library files, and then you can just throw the basic stuff from OpenComputer edit to get completion or something like that. There's also a plugin for IntelliJ IDEA for Lua, which is pretty good. And finds some interesting bugs, actually. So that's basically, so the latter one is basically my recommendation because that's what I've used for a bit and I pretty much liked. There's an issue for everything. Because grok essentially is asset. So internally the grok is called asset. If you've ever played Monkey Island, then you know that grok behaves very much like asset. They cannot attach leads to players, no, but I think Isaiah it was figured out what you can do is you can attach leads to horses. Oh, it was Inuri. Sorry, you two have such a similar name. I'm really sorry. You can attach a lead to a horse, and then you can put a saddle on the horse, and then you can be tied around by drones while sitting on the horse. And yeah, pigs should work too, yes. Can we do that right now? I'd have to set up a drone, and I'd probably die in the process. So maybe later at the OC booth. What is happening to the computer? Oh, someone is installing things. Yay! I have an idea who it is. So yeah. There is no free hoverboots barrel. No, there isn't. There is one with manuals for TIS-3D though, if you're interested in that. Over at the booth. Why? Because everyone would have them on again and that looked terrible last time. Sorry. Also, there's a bunch of jumping puzzles throughout the whole thing and it would make it way too easy. For what it's worth, if you haven't found it yet, there's also a secret or actually there's two secrets at least that I know of in and around the OpenComputers booth, and I'm sure there's more all over the con, so have fun finding those. It's not? Which cells are rectangular? Oh, those. Oh, Game of Life, yay! They are not squares because I was probably too lazy to use the half chars from Unicode to make those, or it's so old that it was still made while there was no Unifont renderer yet. There's actually still a texture-based font renderer in the mod if you prefer that, because, I don't know, you don't like the font or anything. And there's gliders. Let there be life! Game of Life. All right. Anything else? So yeah, I mean, I can just really quickly mention there's a few more blocks in OpenComputers than there was last BTM. So one of them I already mentioned, that's the transposer, which is basically just, let me grab that. Yeah, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. So that's this one, and this basically allows you to move items and liquids between inventories and tanks adjacent to the transposer. The 3D printer was already existent last time. I think the whole con was full of companion cubes because of that. Indeed. I'd also like to mention that it already worked in 1.8 as early as around February this year, so everyone complaining that rendering in 1.8 is a bitch, please. The other block is this one. This is called the net splitter, and this was basically added as a response to what we had last time. Last time we had a robot which actually broke a cable block and then placed it again to reconnect stuffs differently. So this is basically an advanced version of that, and it reacts to redstone, so a signal inverts the configuration basically, and you can configure individual sides with a wrench. Now, finally, the one big rework that's coming in 1.6 will be the server racks. So before, let's see, where are they? Here they are. Before there was basically just one thing you could put in there, and that's the servers. And what, seriously? What did I miss? Header stuff? I don't know. So basically before you could only put actual servers in the server racks. So the rework is basically that you can have different kinds of rack mountable objects, and the currently two additional ones are a disk drive mountable, so you can basically craft a disk drive into something else and then place that in, and then you can have floppy disks in your server rack. Let's grab one and you can slot that in. Whoops, if I can hit, there we go. And the other one is this one. This is the terminal server now. So basically before you could connect remote terminals to each server directly. Now you have this terminal server and you can connect them to those. And then in the server, which you currently don't see here, but in the server you have a much more advanced way of configuring how things are connected. So you can basically say, I want to connect that item in the server to that side of the server. And I also want to have the ability to connect subcomponents in those mountables to other sides. So for example, if a server has two network cards, then I can connect the server to the top, and on the top is maybe a screen, so I can type stuff into the server. And the network cards I can connect to the left and right side of the server rack. and then that server can act as a much more advanced router for subnetworks on either side of the server rack. So yeah, and of course servers are still a thing, so you can still plug in servers into the server rack. One thing of note also is that due to the rework of the main GUI of the server rack, the individual components in the server rack now have their own GUI. So if you click the server on top here, you will, instead of the rack GUI, you will get the GUI for that server. Oh my god, that was quick. Thank you. So yeah, that's how the inside of the server rack looks like. And as you can see here, there's two servers, and the first one is connected to the back, and the second one is connected to the bottom of the server rack. Exactly. So if the first one, for example, let's say it had a network card in it, that would be a smaller connection right below the yellow one, and you could connect that to any of the 5 sides, sorry, of the server rack. So yeah, that's also the main reason why I have not ported it to 1.8 yet, because yeah, so much changed. Also, I got busy with TIS-3D, so there's that. But yeah, I think that's the main changes since last time. Let's see if anything pops out. I think that's the important stuff. What disable button? What? What's a drop bear? I look at the screen? What? I did look at the screen. It's just okay. I don't know. I'll just pick TIS-3D all the time because it's cool. Oh, right, I did that. So thank you for the reminder. Every file system component, so the floppy disks and the hard drives, they now can be switched into a raw mode, which essentially gives you a different way of interacting with the hard drive, and that is block-based and raw data. So the file system component gives you some, well, predefined way of interacting with the storage, like give me the directories and give me the file at that location and then read from that file. And the raw mode basically just gives you, I want to read the bytes at that address, at that offset, and I want to write to that offset. So since a lot of people wanted that, here it is. They're still obviously a lot smaller than the tapes in Computronics, so if you want real big storage and backup stuff and etc., then you still want to use those. If you want smaller but let's say more arbitrary storage, then you can use the raw mode. And to change that you can just right-click the storage item while you have it in your hand, and then a GUI pops up. And that's where you change it. But be aware that switching between the two modes obviously wipes the data on it. Anything else I forgot? Oh, look at that. Oh god, I forgot to put off. Oh my god. I still have the goggles on. Oh well. That's silly. Okay. Any more questions? Excuse me for a second. The cat wanted out. So, yes, I always wear goggles over my glasses. Safe space implemented into... What do you mean by safe space? Did it now? It did before. Things happen. Oh, now I get it. Okay, sorry. I was totally not expecting that now. No. OC will remain trigger happy. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I think that's about it for now, because I have no more ideas, so yay! Thanks everybody for coming. I'd also like to thank GreaseMonkey again for the work on the videos. It's still amazing. I'm still not really understanding how the fuck it works, so that's great. And yeah, have fun on BTM. Over 9,000. MP, obviously. Yay! Oh god. Do that again and again and again. Please.